Recording is in progress. So we're gonna call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Blake Ellefson,
Here.
Gary Eater. Is Gary Eater online? Pat Kinney,
Here.
Jim Schultz.
Here.
Looks like 3 present, 1 absent.
All right, well, moving on to public comments. We'll make a couple chances for public comments. Anyone online would like public comments?
Yes, I'd like to.
Sure. Who is this? Could you say your name?
Yes, I'm Anita Hawkes. I'm a property owner in Ashland, Wisconsin. And I just wanted to ask that you consider selling some parcels in the near future because they need maintenance. I have one parcel that is next to mine that I'm very concerned about the buckthorn spreading into my property, and I'm nervous about some of the larger trees that I just feel should be taken down as well, so that they don't fall on my garage. But anyways, I do ask also that when you do plan to sell these parcels, that you don't do what Bayfield County just did. And they just sold 2 out of 6 parcels on the Wisconsin surplus. And they just priced the minimum bid so high that people could not actually afford those and all the fees that go along with the auction process. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Anita. I'm gonna ask if there's any additional public comments. Nobody here. Anybody else online? This will be your last chance for public comments online. All right, hearing none. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, approval of the agenda. Is there anyone who'd like to make a motion?
This is Pat. I'll make a motion to approve.
This is Jim. I'll second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor? Any discussion about the agenda? It appears there's none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moving on. Approval of minutes. This is on the approval of the October 8th, 2024 meeting minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from October 8th.
This is Pat. I'll second, but I got a question.
Okay.
There's the process that Bayfield County uses. It's in there. I'm looking for it's this NMMN. Have you looked, Jen? Have you looked at the minutes? I'm just wondering if it's correct.
What page is it on?
Oh, I didn't write it down.
Second page, talking about the cycle, right?
Yeah,
Red, in red.
In
rem.
yeah, is that? Could you pull that up and so Jen can look at Bayfield County there in rem, second line on the right. Is that correct as far as the minutes? Does that make sense to you? I'm not going to ask you what that means because we'll probably have that discussion later with one of the agenda, but does that look correct as far as the minutes recording what Bayfield County uses?
Yeah, Bayfield County uses NREM. Yeah, and very basically it's where they go through the court.
So
Whereas
it's spelt like that. There's not a hyphen.
Yes.
And it's correct.
Yes.
Okay, I just
Yep.
wanted to make sure that was accurate then. Thank you.
Yep.
So my questions are done then. So we have to vote on it.
All right, so we've had some discussion. Let's make a vote on the approval of the minutes from October 8th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moving on. So we have to elect a new vice chair since Mike Stark is no longer on the committee. He moved out of Ashland County and LaPointe, and now we are required to have a new vice chair. So, since I got nominated without even, Mr. Schultz, you look like you're in a very good spot. How do you feel about that? All right, Pat, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Congratulations.
We're very excited and we appreciate you stepping into the vice chair role.
Well, we should vote.
We're gonna make a vote on that. Okay, yeah, so,
We don't need seconds on nominations, do we? I don't think so. But I'll second, even though I don't think we need it. So we have a motion by Blake.
Yep,
and
motion.
I'll second by Pat. Okay.
I guess we'll do a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing none opposed, congratulations. All right, we got a new vice chair. Moving on, zoning, discussion, action items.
Okay, Krish printed up this of our last 3 months of permits. So just to give you a little update on that, it looks like October, there was 30 permits issued. November was 15 and December 12. That brings a total of 253 permits that were issued for 2024. Comparison to 2023, there was 261. 8 permits difference from 23 to 24. So a little bit less. And if there's not any questions about that, I'll just go on with a little bit of the action items here, what our plan is for the winter. So we have the shoreline protection model. It's from the DNR. It's going to be updated. And they sent us a model of they changed the format basically, and a few words also in the new ordinance. But either way, we have to go through that. I will get it through the corporate council, and then I think they have to certify it, the DNR does, and then I'll be bringing it back to the committee, and then I believe it has to go to the county board. So we'll be working on that this winter. And Krisha's, she's going to try to get as many of the old permits. She's going through all the files and scanning them, getting them as many as we can on the computer. Possibly we can get every one of them eventually. Is there anything else, Krisha?
Just something I'd like to add to that. It looks like the latest permits that we have scanned on file are dating back to 2017, and we have permits dating back to all the way to 1969. And these papers are getting older and they're getting more fragile and ripped, and some of them are even written in pencil, so they're getting harder to read. And so I would like to get these scanned onto the computer so that way when we do have record requests, they are more legible and easier to find. So that is the goal with that.
One more thing too, which maybe you do know or not, there's a new system. It's called Catalyst, and the county started using that. I think was it last year, and we're adding the permits to that. And so once a person learns how to use this, anybody can go on there and should be able to pull up any permit. Every single one that we have, we'll have it on there. So it'll be pretty nice for the public to use.
So when I look at these 3 reports for the permits, Ashland County, 253 for the year. Is there a item in here that shows which township that these permits were issued for? And then my second question is, since Ashland, the city of Ashland is the largest populated, do you guys include permits that are issued on behalf of the city of Ashland into this?
Only if they are sanitary permits. And how that works is anybody that's not on the city sanitary system, the sewer system, by state statute, they have to get a permit from the county then. So we enforce that if they're not on the city sewer. So the only time we will ever give permits inside of a municipality is if it's a sewer. So we do the same for all the rest, Mellon, Butternut. And Glidden, they don't have their own, I don't believe they have their own zoning there, but they do have a sanitary system.
So just for my sake, and I don't want to create any additional hardship, but if we could have maybe the township into this report or these, just so we can kind of see maybe growth if,
That is no problem at all. I can just add a column to the report and start entering in either the parcel ID number or their township, like you're saying.
yeah.
And then, as far as knowing which items on this report are for which township, the only items would be LaPointe, and they would be in blue. And that is not including all of LaPointe permits. Those are just permits that were issued by Ed Schaefer, the zoning administrator at the town of LaPointe. And so those are just showing the permits that were sent over that he issued.
Bayfield County's website, for the land and zoning, you can click by township and stuff and see the permits issued there, which is kind of nice because then you know what's going on in an area that's of interest to you. And I don't know if we do that. I haven't looked at that recently enough to know that, but that is kind of nice. But maybe I asked Dan, a week or so ago, some questions related to property taxes, and he sent me the report on equalized values. That's got the breakdown by township and cities of the equalized value, but also the net new construction, which looking through that tells us a lot about where we have activity and what kind of activity related to development. This would correlate with that too. But maybe, and for finance, if you send out that equalized value report, I think that would be really insightful. And then I attended the first comp plan update committee meeting related to the ag in December, and we've got another one coming up here in a week or so. But one of the topics there was zoning. And so as you think about the comp plan, there is an interest in zoning, at least related to ag, but I'm sure there is, related to housing too. So things that you might think of that might be good for the comp plan committee to look at related to zoning. Please, I volunteered to ask questions about this or talk to you folks because I'm on this committee. So I thought, well, I might as well talk to you about that. So if there's anything related to zoning, ag or otherwise, let me know or Alyssa Radke know. Okay.
Sounds good. And I did pull up on our website. I do have under the zoning department, the issued permits, and then it goes by year. And so I went ahead and pulled up 2024, and then it does break down by township, and you can click on each township. Oh, sorry. And it will show you a link, and I have each permit application scanned. So if we were to click this first one, it will show Peggy Call applied for a sanitary permit, and it will show you the permit numbers, when it was issued, what they paid, and the plot plan.
And I'll just add a little to there too. If you guys go on the GIS website, there's a parcel viewer and there's a zoning, and they're two separate ones. And you gotta, if you just call it up on the GIS, I believe it goes to the parcel. So on the top right, you have to make sure, she'll pull this up here. You want to make sure you click on the zoning. So see on the left, it says parcel viewer. So that's the one it's on right now. Now on the right, on the blue, zoning. You want to click on zoning. That's where you can get all of our information. And you can see the colored map there of the county. This is just good info for the public to know that they can just look at that color and they can see how it's zoned right off the bat. The purple is the forestry, the yellow is unrestricted, and that lighter colored on the top right is the reservation. It's unzoned. So there's a lot of good info on there if a person plays around on it.
I can tell you from my neck of the woods in Bayfield County, the fact that I'm glad that you have this online, but, I tend to look at the Bayfield County because of what I own there. But I will tell you, there are certainly neighbors who keep an eye on what's going on, and they look at the websites to see if people have their permits. So one of the issues Ashland County has had is obviously the sanitary permits, whether they have them or not, and doing what they should or shouldn't do. So this does give the public good information to see if people are following the rules. There are certainly people that pay attention.
And I'll add, so how we do that is because by state statute, I can't give out a permit on a property. If there's a dwelling on that property and there's not a sanitary system in our records, I can't give another permit for whatever they want to do until they update that. And we run into that quite often. And in a way, that's kind of nice because then we can get systems updated that are not even in our records at all.
Okay, moving back to is there any additional comments? No?
Maybe too, I'm going to add one more thing as far as on the island, just for anyone who doesn't know. So the town of La Pointe pretty much covers the whole Madeline Island, and they have their own zoning over there. So once in a while, we would get questioned I get questioned quite a bit on, say, like the shoreline protection part, if there's clearing going on over there. But that's under the jurisdiction of the town. Even though we have a shoreline protection ordinance, it goes to the township. And I just checked with the DNR to make sure on that. And they said, the county or the state don't have authority over that. The townships can have their own shoreline protection. So only reason I want to bring this up because sometimes we get complaints about there's too much clearing going on over there on the island, but it's not for us to get involved, I guess.
Okay. So we're moving on. Land description, discussion, and action items.
Yeah, so yesterday I was a little late on the ball sending out the list of our tax deed notice properties. So I don't know if anyone had a chance to look it over. There's a few properties that are eligible for foreclosure this month, but we should probably wait until we get our ordinance squared away, our new ordinance squared away before we start foreclosing on properties. Just so it can be a nice, clean start date on that and conforming to the ordinance and whatnot. But were there any questions on the list?
I think we maybe should go through a few of the highlighted ones, just
Okay.
so we can kind of come up with a plan once we do put this ordinance in place I think, because right now, if I'm looking at this correctly, the first highlighted one, it says we're past the ability to foreclose, right?
Correct.
So that one is now within our window of taking action, let's just say. Okay. And then the other one below that as well, we technically could. There's a few that are coming up here in the first quarter, the first one and then the fourth one. I guess being new to this role and being new to this, it appears that Ashland County has been a little bit lenient on the foreclosure. I guess, do we have a preference on how hard of a stance we take, or is it just black and white? You haven't paid your taxes, we're going to foreclose.
We do have a payment plan policy that we implemented a few years ago to give people the option to get on a payment plan. So that's why some, like, not necessarily on the first page, but like the second page, the first two are past the date. Well, not the first one, but almost the first one. The second one is past the date where we can foreclose. But over in the notes column, you see payment plan is approved. So they've made a payment plan and signed it with us. They've been sticking to their payments. So we're fine holding off on foreclosure so long as they are consistent on their payments. If they miss one payment, we'll say, hey, you missed a payment. If you don't make that payment up, your payment plan is void. Once we void the payment plan, then we would proceed with foreclosure. We haven't foreclosed on many properties this year due to the change in legislation. That was a big factor of it. And just waiting to update the ordinance that we're gonna discuss today.
All right.
I have a
Dan,
question.
go
How
ahead.
many properties do we own that we are already foreclosed on?
How many, I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Because with Act 207, we have to put those up for sale like now. It was like 240 days after the
So like, the-
after the legislation passed. So we have to put those up for sale now because we're hitting that 240-day mark soon.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would suggest that we hire a realtor to do that now, and
Well-
we can discuss why, but
the properties that we own right now
that are already foreclosed upon.
aren't on this list.
Correct.
Would you know how many there are?
Not more than 10.
How long have we owned those? Long time or short time?
It varies. Some we've owned for a couple years and weren't able to sell in the past, others maybe just a year.
So the ones within a year, because those are the ones that are affected by Act 207.
I didn't take any properties after the act passed, so
Okay. So I just want us to be cognizant that if we're going to, the ones that are eligible for sale, are required to be for sale, we should put up for sale with a realtor as soon as possible. And the reason why I say a realtor is because one of the requirements is either this committee decides what the market value is, or you put it on the MLS, which decides what the market itself decides what the market value is. And if you use the MLS, you can't get into any trouble with an illegal taking. The pricing is being put out there by somebody who knows how to price the property. And people can bid on it and go up.
Thank you. Pat?
This whole topic of what do we do or don't do with the parcels, it depends so much on the parcel. Is it an occupied house that somebody's gonna have to heat and utility bills, and whatever? Or has it got contamination issues, we want it or don't want it? This is just a thought, but it might be, in terms of discussion, productive if we went to looking at the draft ordinance and then come back and look at these parcels, and especially with staff, say, well, what do you think of this in the ordinance, given, this wide array of parcels,
Mhm.
some of which we think we can clearly take and resell and recover our costs and be fine with, to those who, we really don't want for various reasons. And it might help us to figure out this initial draft of the ordinance. And my sense is whatever we approve initially as a board on this ordinance, it will not surprise me if we make some changes in the future as we see how things work. But drafting that ordinance, I've got a bunch of questions. And then as we look back at these parcels, you might be able to tell us if something seems to be workable or not.
sure.
Um,
And I guess it would be my recommendation that we don't move to foreclose on any of these parcels today,
Mhm.
so that we can get the ordinance figured out, straightened out, and then at the next meeting, we can proceed with foreclosure. I feel it would be a lot cleaner on my end to do it that way. So I'm not trying to juggle, well, when did we take this? When did we take that?
Are there any that would be disadvantageous to us, i.e. we are accruing interest at 18%, I believe, which is beneficial to the county, but if parcel isn't worth what we're gonna get, then we're holding a parcel that's not back on the tax rolls. But are there any that you'd really want to unload before the next meeting for some reason?
To take?
No, to sell.
Well, we're just talking about taking properties right now.
Yeah,
That-
but as far as listing, Dan was mentioning, are there any that you, for some reason, really would like to get sold, that for some reason it would be to the county's benefit to sell them sooner than later?
Not particularly. I think, like Dan said, I
Yeah.
wasn't aware we were creeping up on that date, so that's good to know. We'll just list all the ones that we have foreclosed on for tax deed. Because we have to.
So I think going back to Pat's original point, right now, I think not to move ahead of ourselves, but we should probably move the discussion around this ordinance up to now so that we can kind of flush this out. Because I think ultimately you are not overly excited about having to take properties until we've got this thing established.
Right, that's why I'm saying, I mean, this property subject to tax deed was just a discussion item, so we can move past it. We don't even have to move.
Yeah, I do think we need to come back to this discussion about these properties as well
Okay.
as the listed ones that we own today.
Okay.
Not right now, but
I agree.
I think, so for this meeting's sake, we'll talk about now, let's move to the draft ordinance, and then maybe you could just give us a update on how, I know, okay, so if we go
That-
back, Dan, law changed, right? It was down in Hennepin County, I think it came through.
Yeah, Tyler versus Hennepin County was a unanimous Supreme Court decision. In response to that, the legislature passed Act 207, which laid out the procedure that we have to follow. And the actual legislation is in the packet, or the actual statute now is in the packet. Okay. So that lays out the procedure. So this resolution, which I'll admit I stole from Bayfield County.
Yeah, I still have some more comments on it, edits.
Yeah,
for it.
yeah, we can, and Jen will have some edits to it. Um, but this resolution pretty much lays out what we have to do based on the state statutes. And I know there's one area where Jen might have an issue with, where there's two sections cited in the statutes. The reason why both are cited in there because one lets us add staff time and the other doesn't, and one pertains to purchasing and the other pertains to tax deeding. So,
Okay, so really what Ashland County needs to do is approve this ordinance here in the zoning so that we can come into basically compliance or match up with how the new laws are.
yes, we're required to do this by the new statute.
Okay. And so me reading through this, I didn't see anything that was overly concerning from my standpoint, but since this is your kind of, is there anything that you wanted to add on top of what Dan said, or what impacts maybe this will have for you, if any?
The only impact is that it will change our process. And because we'll have to send out extra notices and, go through contacting a real estate agent and that kind of thing to get it listed. But otherwise there's nothing, nothing major that's changing for the process or besides the process.
Jen, you had a few changes you wanted to suggest?
Yes. On the first page, the third whereas, the statute reference 75.521 is the reference to the in rem process specifically, which we don't use. That's what Bayfield County uses. So I would suggest that to be changed to 75.12, which is tax deed. And I have these all written down too for whoever wants a copy later.
Okay, just one question, not to go
Yeah.
as long as we're talking. So we have, in our last couple meetings, kind of kicked around possibly looking at what Bayfield County does from an in rem versus how we do it today. We haven't, I think, ever decided yet that we would switch to Bayfield County. We're going to continue the way we're doing it today, right? Which is a 2-year cycle versus a 5-year.
Yeah, I don't know what the in rem cycle is, but yeah, I don't think I'm not aware that we're changing anything.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, and as to the 2-year cycle, I mean, we're not required to do it at 2 years. We can wait longer. I know like Marathon County doesn't do it for 4 years. And other counties,
Correct, but then these properties that they're within our 2-year, right? That's what
Right.
this list is. So we could foreclose.
Yes.
We're not required.
Yes, we can foreclose. It's like 2.5 years past the date of sale of the county tax. So that's why we're foreclosing. If you look under their name, it says 2021. That's the year of tax we're foreclosing on. So,
And then do you have any other changes that you want to suggest?
yes. So I guess this question was more for Dan. All the references to chapters and titles, do we have chapters in our ordinances, or is that from Bayfield County still?
Well, we do, except it's being kind of worked on right now
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
by who, um, I forget who we hired to do the codification. Oh,
Okay.
Municode.
Okay.
So, so I will the reason why there's X's because we have to get the exact numbers before
Yep.
it goes to the county board.
Okay, sounds good. Starting on the second page, there's a lot of references to, the county treasurer, which I know they designate me to do this part. Are they allowed to designate by statute, or should we be adding in this ordinance, hereby delegates to the county treasurer or designee, meaning me?
Well, the statute allows the statute specifically names the treasurer as the person,
Okay.
but gives the treasurer the authority to delegate that to whomever the treasurer sees fit.
Okay, so we wouldn't have
So-
to say or treasurer's designee.
We could add or treasurer's designee in there. Yeah, that's already in the statute.
I think
Okay.
we definitely should add that, especially
Yeah.
since she's going to have her hands on it.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, if you want to add that, that's fine.
Page 2, second paragraph, which is sub 3. There's a section that reads, in April of each year, the treasurer or designee shall provide a report to the zoning and land committee listing all the properties the treasurer has refused to foreclose upon with reason of such refusal, and so shall notify the appropriate assessor and request the value be reduced. That's not something we currently do. Is that going to be a new thing that we do?
I guess that's up to this committee, what they want to do.
Question, what's the incentive for the county to ask an assessor to reduce the value, or for the committee, if it so chooses, to take that role and reduce it? What's the incentive for us?
That we can sell the property easier.
Well, why can't we otherwise? If we're listing it on the MLS, why, what bearing does the assessed value have? I mean, other than the asking price, and we would, all things being equal, prefer a higher asking price.
Well, actually,
But then we can also, and then this leads to the other question of, in the first round of bids, if none are at the assessed value, it says that we're going to reject that. It doesn't give the county the option of accepting one. Why would we go through the work of lower assessed values and then not give the county the option of accepting a bid lower than assessed value?
well, first of all, we have to reject it if it's not at market value. Not
Why
instead
do
of,
we have to reject it?
because that's what the statute says. And that's
The
what the
state
Spring,
statute says that?
yep.
Yes.
And that's what the Tyler V. Hennepin said. The reason why we want to lower it though is we don't want to give people the incentive not to pay taxes. If they don't pay taxes and know we're going to sell it for a higher price and they'll make out, what's the point? They make us the realtor and the bank at the same time. So we want to take that incentive away from them.
I think I understand what this is trying to do. Is it making things more complex though, than really realistically that, and again, maybe this is for, do you see us? I do see a benefit of us at the zoning and land committee in April, getting a list of these properties and then having you discuss those.
Sure.
But I don't think we need to go and to take a reassessment of those, because again, that's really not the reassessment isn't the issue. It's that the people are either deceased or they're unable to pay their taxes. Our values are fairly appropriate in my mind, but that's just me.
So of the two undesirable things, one of which is having to advertise it the first time, and because no bids were at the assessed value or higher, and then having to re-advertise, which is the lesser of two evils, listing it a second time on MLS, or getting the assessor to reassess in terms of costs, timeline, headaches.
Notifying the assessor is as simple as sending an email to the assessor and saying, hey, we're not foreclosing on this because we think it's assessed too high. Can you revalue it?
So my concern there is, it goes back to Dan's point. I didn't realize that under state statute, we couldn't accept a bid less than assessed value to start with.
Less than
Less than
appraised,
market value.
less
Appraised
than
value.
appraised
I'm sorry,
value.
Less than appraised value. to start.
Market value?
It's appraised value either set by an appraiser or this committee.
Yeah, so it's more market value then.
Yeah.
So, we could, and then we got April, and that's the beginning of kind of the real estate season. It's almost like, what if we advertised in March, and I don't know how long we have to have it advertised. You have to wait 6 months before.
6 months. You have to advertise it for 6 months before you can accept a lower price.
So that will impact, there's gonna be a lot to think about how the county handles this. And I think we're gonna change over time with experience and how things go.
Mhm.
But, this whole timeline of how soon we take it, if we need to bake in 6 months because we're gonna sit on some of these properties, then we don't want to wait too long, especially on properties where the taxes owed and whatever other expenses are such that we're gonna have a hard time recovering what we are owed. So flexibility is going to be important,
Mhm.
for staff on this.
That's going to affect the decision on when to take a property
Yeah.
and
And
if it's worth taking a property.
Well, and I think based on just what I'm seeing here and then likely from the 10 properties that we own, each one will have its uniqueness and have its own story about how it goes. And like Pat said, we're gonna maybe have to revisit some of these properties that, let's say they just will not sell, and so, but I think for today's discussion, the edits that you're asking for, and I think we're going back to this one, we should come up with a decision on how we want to have this presented to the county board. So I guess what is your recommendation, and then we can kind of see, or do you want us to decide and tell you?
Recommendation for this April report?
Yeah,
part?
and then the second part of that, so I think the first part of that is valid. It was the second piece of that where, and I guess you feel like that would be valid as well for us in Ashland County.
So the first part, to give a report in April, that's fine, but also I kind of give you that report anytime we are about to foreclose on a property. I'll say, yeah, this one's not very desirable. So I guess it was more like, do you want like a rolling update, or do you want that on April of each year update?
Well, like today, I think it would be good for us to have that list one time to show the properties we own, right? And then have this list rolling. Like-
It's, yeah, so this is always going to be a rolling list. What that's talking about is a list of properties that I refuse to foreclose on.
But you don't refuse to foreclose on anything, right?
We have that option in the statutes and the ordinance.
Yeah, we do have the option. Ultimately, this committee will decide whether to foreclose or not.
Right.
But there's properties out there, like, I'll give an example. And you guys know that platted area across the street from Northland?
Mm-hmm.
There's a property in the middle of that. That's
No access, no
no access to
nothing.
anything. It's eligible for foreclosure, but who the heck's gonna buy it? I mean, there's nothing you can do with it until the city decides to build streets and water and sewer out there. So that property is worthless to us. It's worthless to the public. So do we really want to foreclose on it?
So on that particular property, we're still, if someone does want to buy it someday, we still have a tax bill for them, that we would recover from, or at least partially recover from.
Well, yeah,
So kind of what I do for those is I send out the notice per statute saying you have 90 days to pay the taxes. We go through the 90 days and it's eligible for foreclosure. We just never foreclose on it because it's not worth it to us to foreclose on it. But I keep that rolling so that in the event we do want to foreclose, we can.
So one of the issues with landlocked properties, and there's a number of them, and especially out of town, where there's people that have 40s that are landlocked. If someone says, well, I'm not going to pay the taxes, what do we do as a county? Do we ask for a lower appraised value? Because, the reality is, especially if guys are looking for hunting land, if it's landlocked, they're really hard to sell. And it's only because it's landlocked in some cases. And then if we're not going to take it, and they're going to well, if the county's not going to take it, then why pay the taxes? I mean, some of this could go on indefinitely
Yeah.
for some properties, and that some way have some value. I may be wrong in this, and I probably am, but a number of years back, someone asked me about getting access to landlocked parcels that were in forest crop. I think under the law, someone can go to court to compel an adjacent landowner to give them access, typically down a fence line or property line, to get in there so they can hunt. So we may, have to, on some parcels, deal with that. But some of these parcels, like the one you mentioned at Northland, if it's, okay, it might be small and not worth much. But on the other hand, if we look at it and think, there might be development out here someday, the taxes that were owed, most of it might be interest, but if it's not really worth much, maybe at some point we have an interest in actually owning that because it might help us facilitate, development, whereas not having it may not. But that just comes back to discretion.
right, because, I mean, we do, if we take the property, we do have to advertise it, the type 1 notice, or put it on the MLS. If it doesn't sell, then we're not obligated to try to sell it again. So we can keep it, or we can sell it at a lower price. But, so that would go to your point of, do we expect development to happen in the next 10 years?
Yeah.
Is it worth our effort to go ahead and take the property?
I got a question on section XX, Administration Management of Tax Deeds, section 6A. Near the end of that, it says that the thing will be mailed to the last known address on file. So I'm thinking of people that are deceased, family or relatives, whatever, attorneys handling things out of the area. The Postal Service will forward mail for 6 months, and then after that, someone would have to renew the forwarding order. But I also know from family history with post offices that the post office really doesn't want to keep forwarding mail. And sometimes they'll just say no. I had an aunt that died in Florida in the late 90s. And despite our best efforts of getting mail forwarded, it turned into a major, major headache to just get things done. We knew what should be coming from where, but some of these places says, nope, we've got to mail it to where it was. That building was sold. And so things were going into a mailbox for somebody else. And, and then, okay, what happened to it? It just was such a headache. So instead of this last known address, if we can, could we add a statement in there, or appropriate legal representative or something else? So if we know there's, say, an attorney handling an estate, or someone is the executor, that there's language in there that we can send it to somebody else, so we're not sending it to a mailbox in the house where someone's deceased. And
We could. This is the language that the statutes use. Unless I've been in like personal or phone contact with someone's like executor or their attorney, their last known address is the only place that I would know to send it to.
could we add a statement that would give you the authority to send it somewhere besides there if you knew, let's say it's down.
I think I could on my own, but legally I have to send it to their last known address, but I could probably at my discretion also send it to like their attorney.
Would you want that in the state, in this ordinance so that it's clear that you have that authority?
Do I need that authority? I don't think I would need it to do an additional.
So really what you're doing, it sounds like that's more of like an accommodation for an estate, which she said she'd likely do, right? I think oftentimes the issue is the company that you're dealing with refuses to change an address or update an address or fix it to have it go to the right people. Whereas I think what she's saying, if she knew that the person had been deceased and an attorney contacted them, she could send another copy to that attorney as opposed to making it a requirement in here.
Well, some of the places it was, well, legally, this is the only place we can send it. And so, yeah, we're gonna send it to Florida and somebody else owns the building now. And then, and the post office didn't want to forward. So some, just a statement or appropriate, party or something, just so that you're covered and have authority. And then you use your discretion, whether you mail it to a mailbox in the Southern County where nobody lives in a vacant house and you know it's not going anywhere. Because the post office really, really doesn't want to forward mail any more than they have to. It's just an ad.
Yeah, and that's fine. If there's nowhere to forward the mail, then that person isn't at that address and we've done our
Yeah, just so
part.
it doesn't become difficult. So another topic is, this is section XX, Administration Management of Tax Deeds yet. The liens, are those liens only for liens the county has, or could it be a mechanic's lien for someone that did work and that's,
Is this section B?
yes.
It's all outstanding liens. So
No.
it's
Shall-
directed to
shall-
a mortgage company, especially specifically.
So shall order a title report, which I have a comment on that later, showing all liens of record against the tax deeded land in existence the day prior to the judgment of foreclosure in favor of the county. So that's showing liens that are in favor of the county, which would be like the taxes, maybe a child support. No, not a child support lien, but yeah, like taxes, basically.
So it's only liens the county has on the property. And what about if someone, a construction company has a lien on the property? Is that a consideration in this at all then, as far as?
No, I don't
language
think
on-
so. They would have to settle that with the construction company on their own. This is just to repurchase.
They have, if somebody's
Yeah.
repurchasing the property, they have to pay off any liens to private organizations. And that's in the statute. And the reason for that is people could, you could have a
get out of a
$500,000 mortgage on your house, have your property taken by tax deed, which
that's-
then wipes out everything, all of the debt. So, and then come back 6 months later and repurchase from the county and be debt free.
So we should update the language in this
Yeah.
to say that.
I think it says that in a further later section. And if it doesn't, we should update that. Yeah. The
Well,
repurchase.
Well, even if it doesn't, this section says that they only need to show liens in favor of the county.
So that statement in favor of the county, that's the part that wasn't clear to me. Something that said, liens owed to the county or something. So I know it's specifically liens the county has as opposed to any other liens. Otherwise, we're getting in the one more layer of getting in the middle of
Well,
cleaning up.
So if the former owner or such former heir provides a proof of satisfaction of all liens of record as established in the title report. So basically,
Which-
she pulls the title report. The title report shows a mortgage to NSB. As long as that person comes in with the satisfaction of mortgage from NSB, and then whatever other judgments or
Yeah.
liens were placed, okay, go ahead.
So then in section B, can we strike where it says in favor of the county? Because otherwise this is saying you would receive a title report for all liens. Want me to highlight it, Grisha?
You're talking about B, right?
Yeah, what she has highlighted up on the screen, it's just the end of that sentence.
1 day prior to the judgment. So basically, before you take
1 day
ownership.
prior to foreclosure, that's in favor of the county. the liens in favor of the county, I think is what that's saying.
Showing all liens of record against the tax deeded land. I guess what it's trying to say is that there's a title search done.
Yep.
Before you take ownership at the county.
Right.
It shows all the outstanding judgments. They have to pay for that. The actual people that lost are
Yes.
gonna lose the property, have to pay for the title search.
Yeah.
So the likelihood of ever this happening is so low because these people are losing their property. They're not gonna come to you and be like, hey, I'm losing this tomorrow. I want to pay you $150 to do a title work search, right?
Right. I guess I'm just more saying the wording of it so that we don't have that situation.
Before the purple, it says, report showing all liens of record against the tax deeded land. So that's all liens. And then what's in purple, it references only the county. That's the part that isn't clear to me.
Right, that's
Because
the
if
part
we're
I'm
only, if
concerned
we're only
about.
concerned about the county ones, then
Right,
we should specifically in both places or rephrase this so it's
Yes.
clear that we're only concerned about liens the county has on the property.
But so
I
it's
agree
good.
with what you're saying, but I think we need to be concerned with all the liens and just strike the section that says in favor of the county.
But that's what's happening, is the county is taking the property via judgment foreclosure. So that's gotta be in there because what's allowing this to take place is that the county, they're gonna foreclose,
Yep.
right? And the reason they're foreclosing is that they've got this past due tax, which is that's really what we have for a judgment.
Right.
So that's
I
right.
guess I'm just reading it as the liens in favor of the county, but if that's not how it's,
Well, the county's lien is the first priority.
yes, yep,
It's
you know,
above everyone else.
yep.
Okay, and so we have to keep that in there so that,
Well, then just put all liens, because
Well-
that would include the county lien.
no, the county lien is our lien that we're foreclosing on. All the other liens get wiped. Our lien turns it into our property.
I know, okay. I guess I'm not articulating what
So-
my meaning is.
So if the bank has a lien on the property and we take it, and the bank's lien hasn't been satisfied, so
It
once
goes-
we take it, does that party no longer legally owe the money to the bank?
That's why we as a bank track tax.
I mean, I don't know, I would assume they still legally owe that money, but the lien is wiped from their property.
So that the county can have clear title,
Yes,
yes, and sell it.
yes,
And the bank then has to go
The-
after a judgment on the individual.
right.
Not the property, which is what they did because the property's worth something, whereas the.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that we don't change something because we think that it makes more sense, but the statute here is actually correct. And then
Blake, your microphone.
that judgment, and again, I'll leave this to you to kind of, because you're the expert here. We're just, I think Pat and I are theoretically thinking out loud and
So you want to strike the county, is that correct, Jen? So if the only interest in liens, it is liens owed to the county, then we could just say, pay,
I don't think it should be just the county liens though, and
It should be any
it should be
lien
all
holder.
liens, and I'm just, the way I read it with that in favor of the county, to me, that reads as if it's all liens that the county has against the property instead of all liens, including what Northern State Bank has, what someone else has on it.
so then if you go to the next.
Right, and I know that says all liens, I just want it to be consistent.
Yeah, so. what
That's all I'm
happens-
saying. I understand how
You
it
take-
works.
Takes ownership, everything wipes.
Yep,
They want to come back to you and buy the property back.
yep,
Because like Dan said, now they don't have any liens on the property.
Yep.
Well, you can't sell it to them because they have to show you proof of title that they've got clear on
Right.
all these liens.
Right.
So that's what this is saying. I mean, that's all it's saying. Your judgment is due to it's the number one priority. And so the only way that this would ever occur is if the county were planning to foreclose. And so one day before that foreclosure. Okay, so one day before that foreclosure, we would have to have them pay us $150 to do a title search, which then you would get back from the title company. You'd validate all these liens. Then you foreclose. if that person came back to want to buy that property from you in a very unique situation, which is what this is talking about, they would have to show you that every lien that was on that title report has now been satisfied.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure that the intent is that all liens will be on there and not just county liens. That's all that I'm saying.
In the first part, in that first paragraph.
Yes.
And then, so, let me see if I understand this. So the title reports, and who generates the title reports? Is that something we can do?
Yeah, which is something I was gonna mention once we're done. with
You,
this
you can
part.
do the title?
Yeah, I used to be a title examiner. It's simple,
And then how much time does that take on a typical property for you?
an hour or
And
less.
you track that time as far as an expense the county want to recover from
Yes.
the, so the first one, that paragraph B, we're going to look at all liens. And then if the person wants to buy the property back, we're going to sell it if they cover the liens owed to the county. We're not going to worry about other liens. Is that correct?
If we're going to sell it back to the owner or their
Thank-
heirs, it's all liens.
They need to show proof that they have paid the other lien as well.
And that's what section C is saying, all liens.
So now, my concern is that we're now getting ourselves in the middle of making sure other liens other than to the county are paid. Do we have to do that, or are we choosing to do
No,
We have
that's
to
by
do-
statute.
state statute?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh,
Yes, the Supreme Court made life fun for us. We're now a real estate broker and banker for people.
yeah, that's really unfortunate because it's putting more burden on us. So the big picture things I'm thinking here then, now that we have to take on more than we'd like to, is one is the ordinance should have as much flexibility as we can give staff in the county.
Mhm.
Jen, I think you should have a really good way of tracking all of your time and expenses, all those phone calls, all those people walking up to the counter, all those emails, just some form, and you track it to the hilt. And because it's not just the time, it's the interruptions to get back to what you're doing. So all the flexibility in the world that we can have in this ordinance.
I don't want to nitpick, but it says in here that we have to have a report from a title insurance company.
Right.
Now, what
That-
you would do is you would do it on your own because you
Yes.
have access to land records
Yes.
and deeds.
Yes.
But that wouldn't suffice for this statute because this statute says that this is requiring an actual letter report. So you
Right.
could change it.
Right. Does the statute say we have to do a title company, or is that just part of Bayfield County, what they had in here? Because I know that's Bayfield County's process.
I don't know if it says offhand if it says that.
Because if it doesn't specify a title company in the statute, I think we should just use staff time to do it.
But then we're having to go after, so from a billing standpoint, if I get a bill from Choice Title for $150 to do a title search, that's now something that person is going to cut me a check for. If you go spend 3 hours of your time, that person isn't going to have any ability to be able to cut Ashland County a check for the title search. So I think this statute is taking it off of your plate and saying, I'm not doing anything on this. Give me $150. Here's a title search from Choice Title. They turn around in an hour. Right?
Well, it would be longer than an hour for them.
Well,
It'd be days.
here's the thing, using a title company, again, takes the burden off of us, but it also takes any legal responsibility off us. So they can't, a former owner or heir can't come back and say, well, no, that was already paid and you missed it. You have a title company do it. It's an outside agency. They take all the legal responsibility
Right,
for
but-
making sure everything's done.
We would still have to pay that $150 and then be out that $150 unless they pay it.
No. The statute says that this cost will be paid in advance by the person of, no, so that if this buyer is that person we foreclosed on or their
Right.
heirs.
Yeah, you have to pay in advance. That's the
You
last.
get a check.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure because I know you know how to do this really well. I can tell that based on how you want to do it. But based on the statute, you're not allowed to do it because we have to have a third party, a title
the
company.
ordinance.
Yes. So let's just make sure that we keep it that way.
Okay.
I guess, again, that takes away all of our liability associated with.
So are we gonna have a title company do title searches before we serve properties as well? Or do you
No.
want to?
No, this is just for people who come back who want to repurchase the property.
Okay. Just making that clear so we don't have to
Right.
change the rest of the process.
And while we're talking about this, is somebody keeping track of the changes that we're talking about? Because I want to make sure that when you vote on it, you actually know what you're voting on. That's all.
Well, and I don't think we're changing on this, right? I think it's
Well,
gonna,
there was a change earlier that Jen.
oh yeah, there was a bunch of changes earlier, but this one we haven't
Right.
changed. We're just discussion.
Right.
Okay, so maybe we should move on from this one because we've kind of beat this unique situation to death, which may never happen. So I think, can we move to the next one that you have a change for? Yeah, sir.
Total agreement, using the third party system for the title search, and I'll give you a real good example. About 10 years back, I was trying to clean up some family property, and we had a company in town here do a title search. Everything come back good. However, that company went out of business. And in the meantime, we needed another title search. That title company found previous business lien on that property that the first one somehow did not. So, you know, that way it would, you know, I'm sure Jennifer can do that kind of work, but it would alleviate any future legal problems if you did it for one, maybe missed something, and then somebody else, you know, made an exception or favors or whatever. So I'd be very, very careful on you know, doing that on your own free time, that we got to follow the legal statuses on that. You know, that's, you know, it cost me some extra time and money there, and it was a lot of grief and aggravation. So, just wanted to make that point.
So it says title insurance company. Is that in the state statute and therefore there's no ifs, ands and buts?
I don't know offhand. I'd
Could
have
you
to look
check
at,
that?
the statute is on the,
Yeah, the statute, but you know, some of these things you said, we don't have a choice. It's in the state statute, but using the title insurance company, I guess if we could find out, or you could check on that out after the meeting. Because if it, by state statute, if it's one of those things we have to do, well, then there's no point in talking about it and we would know before the board meeting.
okay, I'll look at the statute for that. But then the question comes in, if it doesn't say title company, what do you want to do?
Well, I guess I would agree with using the title company. The other
So does it really,
factor in this, aside from these title searches, some of them, you get those quote clouded titles. It would keep the county out of the middle of any disagreements that might crop up. And you could argue that perhaps the county, someone might say, well, you have a conflict of interest. You did a title search, and whatever results you come up with, what you find or maybe don't find,
Right.
someone could argue that you had a conflict of interest. You wanted to take the property for whether that was true or not, but it keeps us away from real or perceived conflicts of interest. And that might be the biggest factor in having the title insurance company do it.
It looks like Gary has raised his hand on Zoom.
Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Can you hear? Okay, just a note here that where it says the cost of which shall be paid in advance by the person notifying the treasurer. We'll have to have some kind of a fee schedule and an agreement with a title company because, I just went through this and I paid $451 to the title company to check this property out. So we would certainly want to have the sense which title company we're going through, what they're going to charge to do their title search, because they charge $200 for the letter, $150 for the prep, $30 for recording fee, $66 for a transfer fee. So it totaled $451 that I had to pay. So I think so that we don't shock the person that's asking what is the cost that I'm going to pay up front, or we get hit later with a higher cost. We'll have to have some kind of an agreement with the title company. What is your fees? And so that it doesn't change, because we were talking 150 and I paid 450 one, so
But
I'm not
in-
sure
Right.
how we would do that.
some of the things you're talking about wouldn't be included, like the transfer fee and the recording fees. So I work with the title company, both Gowie, Choice, there's others, but the most you'd pay for a letter report is 150. Gowie will charge you 100. So there was more involved, I think it sounds like, in the property dealings that you were doing, Gary. So if you read the statute, there is no requirement to have a title insurance company. It's pretty vague. I will leave it. I, I think we here at the committee level sounded like we would like a title insurance company just to pull that. The situation's so unique though that I think for now we could probably move past it.
Maybe then, given what Gary said, maybe adding one more sentence that said the former owner is responsible for all other fees and charges associated with transferring the property, just so they don't come in and say, okay, well, I paid the $150 or whatever for the title search. What do you mean there's all this other stuff? That way it's clear up front that they're responsible for everything else.
Yeah, and that, I think that's written in the next section, C, towards the end there. Shall convey the tax
Yeah,
due to land
Yep,
and
it's
all
there.
costs and
Yep, you got it.
expenses. Yeah,
Yep, it's there.
yep.
So would you like to go past, I mean, we've been on this one for a while.
I don't have anything. I was just looking it over again quick this morning, and that was about as far as I got.
There were quite a few that were crossed out, that were stricken. Now, would you be able to, after this meeting or sometime this week, maybe come up with a finalized ordinance, Danny, and have that sent around to the committee so that we could kind of?
Yeah.
Okay, because I think we have to put this on the agenda for the next board meeting.
It doesn't have to be the next board meeting, but ideally it would be.
It should be.
Yeah, so like if we can get that and then come up with a plan to have us all have reviewed it comfortably with all the information, and then, I don't know, will we need to have another meeting before the next board meeting to approve that?
Um,
Or are we giving authority to make these changes?
well,
Pat?
I think you would vote to make the changes that Jen suggested, except for the last item we're talking about.
Make changes as discussed.
Yeah, changes as discussed. And then, we can send it out, we'll send it out. And if you guys have a problem with it, we can have another meeting before we go to the board with it.
So if you made those changes as soon as you reasonably can, send it out to the committee. But in terms of open meeting laws, we have to be careful that we're not then, having a discussion on
Right.
county business outside of a meeting. But if we get it as soon as you can reasonably get it to us, and then if we have comments or feedback, we can send them to you or Jen, and we just leave it at that. Here's a comment, here's a question. And then when we get to the board meeting, you would have our questions and comments in advance without us having a discussion. And we get to the board meeting, then we hopefully can finalize any details and you would know what to expect.
Right, we would, if we're gonna make changes other than discuss, we'd have to have another meeting, public meeting. Now, if we know what that is, we can do it at, half an hour before the board meeting, just so we have it done.
But the board has to approve this, which means the board can make modifications to whatever is sent to the board, correct?
Yeah, but I think if the committee wants to make changes, we should do it in a meeting beforehand and then have the board get that cleaner version. I think that way we don't run afoul of open meeting laws.
Well, and realistically, and I'm not trying to say, but this would just slow us foreclosing down another month if we weren't to get this in front of the board, which I think at this point I think we're not pushing forward to foreclose right now. We're still going to wait, we're just waiting until this ordinance approves. So one more month at a board meeting, if there's major changes that come after this. But so I think based on the conversations, we've got the changes that we've made comments on. She's going to send around an updated version after this meeting or this week or when she can, so that we can, as a committee, get after it, look at it. If there are questions, concerns, provide those back to Dan and, include, so that we can maybe discuss those before a next board meeting if needed. Pat?
Third whereas, I think there should be a period at the end of it. But I also have a question on, this is on the first page of it. No, not the first page, it's the owner occupied. So it is the first page, section C, owner occupied single family residence. Why is owner occupied single family residence singled out as opposed to a property that's rented? Or in Ashland, there's no shortage of bigger houses that are now, duplexes or an owner occupies. Someone might have an apartment building where they live in one unit. So why is that in there, and why is owner occupied single family residence singled out?
Because that's what's specified in statute. So a vacation home would not be subject to the same restrictions, nor would a business. So if we were to take a commercial property, we can just take it and sell it for market value, and the same with a vacation home. But an owner occupied has the option of them or their heirs repurchasing it. And that's in Act 207.
So all this other discussion only applied to owner occupied single family?
Yes,
So like the properties that are raw land, no buildings, we can just go and take.
correct. It's only owner occupied. It's kind of like when you had a house on the farm, Pat. You would have, you would have had the option to repurchase it because your parents owned it and occupied it. But if it's just vacant land, no.
Well, maybe it was obvious to everybody else, but I didn't realize this whole thing applied only to owner occupied.
Not the whole thing, just certain parts of it do. Right, so like section 6, under this administration management, second page, number 6, all of that has to do with
All of that.
all of that has to do with owner occupied single family, but at our discretion, we can apply it to everything else.
So could you add somewhere in this document that, just what you just said, that we looked at all of that, that applies to the single family owner occupied? I didn't realize it didn't apply, because there's nothing in here, as far as I remember, that tells us what about everything else. I
The-
guess
The whole
somewhere
rest
may-
of it applies to everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll do a cover sheet for this item on the agenda. That way the county board kind of knows.
Yeah, and I think just making that clear up front, because again, that whole discussion we had was only on owner occupied about that lien search and all that. And I think the majority of the discussion that we have is going to be focused on owner occupied because of the sensitivity, the regulations, we're trying to protect people in their homes and stuff. The other piece of it, and I think that'll be for us when we're looking at properties to take, makes it a little bit easier for you that you don't have to follow all these rules
Mhm.
if we go after those.
Yep.
Well, we've beaten this horse quite hard to death almost. It feels like we're at a good spot here to possibly move on.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
The
good.
only other things I have are like little grammatical things. So if we don't have to discuss those. I think Dan and I can just work that out.
I totally trust
Okay.
your ability to do that between you and Danny. And then again, if anything comes up in the next day, you guys have changes you want before they give them back to you, throw them towards Dan and we'll get them included.
Just a quick, Dan and Jen.
Dan and Jen.
Yeah, make sure you send any comments to both of us.
Sorry, I was
Yeah,
trying to
that-
exclude.
It just makes sure she gets them too. That's all.
Okay, so that's all we had on that.
So you need to vote for the ordinance with the changes suggested.
So for number 7, item B, we need to make a vote on adding the ordinance for the sale and distribution of proceeds from tax deeded land sales based on the discussion, there will be some changes to the final document, but we need to make a vote on if you guys are in approval of how this gets presented to the full board at our next meeting. All those in favor? I would like to make a motion. Sorry, we need a motion on this.
This is Pat. I'll make a motion to approve the changes as stated.
Jim, I'll second it.
All right, we've got a first and a second. Now we're gonna vote on this. All those in favor?
I,
Aye. Hearing none opposed? Passes. All right, great. We were gonna talk about property subject to tax deed, but I don't know if we need to keep on that. I guess, is there any further discussion that we need on that right now?
I say you postpone it until
Yeah,
after this ordinance.
I think
becomes
since we aren't
official.
able to do that and we're gonna require something in the April meeting to kind of go through it based on that new ordinance, I think we focus on that time frame. Pat, do you have any comments?
so this ordinance, the 240 days prior to January 1st, 2026.
That's in the statute.
So does this give us effectively most of a year
Just until 2026. After that, it's 180 days.
to work through the backlog of what we already have? But what about 2025? If we approve this ordinance, the rules go into effect when we approve them.
Yeah, and then we have any property taken between now and the 2026 date would be 240 days. Any property after that would be 180 days, as per the statute.
So as far as when the rules go into effect, we could wait on passing this ordinance. Would we then be operating under kind of the old rules per se that we have? Or we really have to follow the state rules as it is?
We have to follow the state rules. As a passive Act 207, we are now at 240 days, which is why I'm saying we need to address the properties we already own.
So then I'm thinking this April 1st of this year. So if we have to follow what the state has in place, we might as well get on with the county board passing this. So as we hit April, we kind of get in step with what we envision doing. Yeah, okay.
Microphone. All right, microphone check. All right, so we're gonna move on. We've discussed number 7. Moving to 8. Land records discussion.
Brittany had sent a chat, said she had to leave for another meeting, and she did not have any items for the agenda.
We'll take that as a moving on. Number 9, other business? Do we have any other business? No other business, a lot of head shakes. We're gonna schedule our next meeting. Well, we need to do that because there's all these hot topics going. Well, we like our Tuesdays, right?
Whatever works best for you guys.
Go ahead, Pat.
Do you have some idea when the next board meeting might be?
Yeah, Gary and I have been talking about that. It's going to be, I think, the first week in February, around that time period.
So Jen, in terms of if the board approves this ordinance and then you can then proceed with doing whatever needs done after that, do you have an idea when would be a good time for you as far as once an ordinance is approved, saying, okay, let me do whatever to get ready for another meeting, when that might occur?
I mean, we could do it a week or two after the board meeting. Cause I imagine at our next committee meeting, we can vote on foreclosing on some of the properties and then start doing that process.
And then, so you get them listed in spring, which gives us a better chance of getting them sold than otherwise?
Yeah.
Okay.
The only, I believe I'm gonna be away at a conference the 3rd week of February. It's the 19th through the 21st, I believe I have a conference.
Yeah, and I'm going to be in Madison that week too.
Thankfully, I don't have to drive that far. Just Appleton.
And actually, I gotta check my, hang on.
So sounds like the 11th might work.
Hang on.
Pat's got to get his calendar up.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Lucretia has the calendar up there.
There any chance we could do this in an afternoon? Or,
Absolutely.
I'm doing this, if there's room, I'm doing this, online force adaptation workshop for 8 weeks, and it starts, at 10 on Tuesdays,
Okay, when does it start?
third week of January, as long as I get in.
Okay, because we're gonna have an exec committee on the 14th.
Of January?
Yeah, Gary and I
that's- that
just talked
part's-
about that today.
That part's fine. So January 14th exec. But other than, I'd like to stay away from Tuesday mornings if I could through late March.
Okay, so Tuesday afternoon, 3 p.m. Why are you laughing? What's wrong with 3 p.m.?
It'd be good because we know we'd be out of here at 4.
All right,
So the 11th at 3?
11th, Tuesday 11th at 3 p.m. I really appreciate afternoon meetings.
February?
Okay. and if-
February 11th, yes.
All right, and then if something happens with the board meeting, I'll let you guys know.
All right. Well, it looks like we got one last thing here. Pat, would you like to make a motion? Jim,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
all those in favor?
I,
Aye. All right.